Good evening, everyone. Welcome to 2-8 Tonight. I'm Mark Halperin, and I'll do my best to guide you through this hour. Very grateful to you for joining. Uh, Tariffs remain the big story, but there's other stories we'll cover tonight. As always, we'd love your participation. You'll be eager, I hope, to talk to our two incredible guests tonight, who have both been with us before, and I'm always glad when they're back. Beverly Halberg, the Republican strategist, and Selena Zito, the great modern de Tocqueville of current America, chronicler of everything, including understanding why Donald Trump has won 2 out of 3 presidential elections. Both those ladies will be here, open to your questions. If you want to get in on the conversation, you're here in the two-way platform, raise your yellow hand, that electronic hand. We'd love to have you be part of the conversation, particularly if you've never raised your hand before. Tonight's the night, regardless of what your political views are or anything else. Love to have you be part of it. And if you're watching on YouTube, or say you're watching on X, and say you're thinking, you know what, I hate what's being said right now. I'm going to go in the chat and write something scatological or personal attack on somebody. Don't do that. That's not what this platform's about. Use it as an opportunity to learn some new perspectives, some new positions, some new points of view that your fellow Americans might hold. It will be very healthy for you to just don't put smack in the chat. Peace, love, and understanding always. Thank you for being with us. I will run through the headlines. We'll bring in our guests. We'll play some great videos, and then we'll get to your questions. As I said, tariffs top story. The markets started the day. If you were at the morning meeting, you saw this. The markets were up this morning, but as the Wall Street Journal headline there says, stocks sink into the close, wiping out an early rally. Why did they go up initially and then back down? Nobody really knows. A lot of speculation about what happened at the White House briefing, what the president said, what the USTR, U.S. Trade Representative said on Capitol Hill. Who knows? But the point is, the losses were not as bad as they were the previous days, but still not a great day because their losses are back down. The China tariffs are going into effect tonight. Maybe the markets went down because they thought the president would suspend or delay the China tariffs that go into effect. There are negotiations going on. And to the extent there was a rally, I think that was part of the thinking is if there are lots of deals, that'll make the markets less upset. The Italians, the South Koreans, others, the Japanese are all going to be negotiating. We'll listen to the president talk about that in a minute. New York Times reports, or maybe it's the Wall Street Journal. Somebody's reporting tonight.
The
Can't remember
Times.
which. The Times. Well, I don't know which story you're talking about. Not well, this one is not the story I meant, but in any event, yeah, Wall Street's still really angry. That's true. I can confirm that. And there's also a lot of focus today on the verbal spat between two of the president's top advisors, Elon Musk and Peter Navarro, taunting each other on social media, or Musk taunting Navarro on social media, Navarro trashing Trump, Musk earlier on cable. Politico sees deeper meaning in this. The White House is playing it down. The story I was going to mention, but thank you for those three, is that the Times, the Journal, is reporting that the Chamber of Commerce and other leading Washington groups are thinking of going to court to sue and say the tariffs are illegal. You never predict, if you're smart, you're like me. You never predict judges, justices, or juries, but challenging the president's authority to impose these tariffs in court is something that could win in the Supreme Court eventually. The court rulings continue to come down on a variety of things related to Doge primarily, but not exclusively. The president won a case today. He's lost some cases. You know my policy, all these incremental things, even the Supreme Court rulings, if they're procedural and not final, but intermediate as things get sent back down to the district court and the Court of Appeals. I'm just not into talking about them because the press treats things like big wins and losses. They're really not. They're just intermediate. It is the case that you don't want a string of losses for whether you're the president or the president's opponents. One case that did come down today, although again, I believe it will be appealed, is a district court judge who is a Trump nominee for the bench said the Associated Press has to be left back, not just into the open press events, but this judge says the AP has to go back in the pool, which is going to be an interesting thing for the White House to deal with. Reconciliation. The president still does not have the votes. Speaker Johnson does still not have the votes. The House this week is trying to pass the Senate version of the reconciliation instructions. They don't have the votes. And some people are saying they're not going to get the votes. Sean, Dan, and I continue to say they'll get the votes. They went from like 24, now there's maybe a dozen no's, but they're going to get most of those no's back. And they don't need everybody. They can lose a few. So we'll see where that happens. But as John McCain would say, it's always darkest before it's totally black. It may be that they don't get it, but the people associated with the White House and Speaker Johnson believe they will eventually get it. Last thing I'll mention before I bring in our guests is New York Times has a story following on stories that have been in the Washington Post and elsewhere about Social Security. And reporters are doing good work. They're going to individual Social Security offices out in the hinterlands, and they're saying, how's things going in the age of Doge? And I will tell you, I don't know if it's bad policy because maybe we can't afford to have as many people working Social Security as we used to with cuts. But it's definitely bad politics because the optics of it are horrible, and they're turning off a lot of people who are on Social Security because the lines are longer, the information is less available. There are things you used to be able to do over the phone that you can't now do. And definitely keep watching that because it's a test of Doge's capacity to cut fat but not bone. And it's a very populist issue. And an enormous number of Americans are on Social Security or live in households that get money from Social Security. So this is not a niche issue. It is a big deal. And it is one that many people, including some Republicans, keep pointing me to and saying they have to get this right. And there are indications that they are not currently getting it right. All right. We're going to play some sounds for you of various people talking, including the President of the United States. But I want to bring in our guests to share in the joy of watching videos with all of us. And here are our guests, Selena Zito from Pennsylvania, really one of the best writers and storytellers and explainers of America of anyone I know in my business, and Beverly Hallberg, a Republican strategist who is awesome on this show because she speaks truth to power or whoever else comes up. So thank you, ladies, both for joining. Very grateful to have you here. I'd love to start, Selena, with you and just because I haven't talked to you about it, what's your 30,000-foot view of how the tariffs are going as a policy and as something the country's discussing?
Terms of, geography is everything when it comes to this issue, I think. And so I'm in a part of the country, I live in a part of the country, Western Pennsylvania, but I also cover the Appalachia and the Great Lakes Midwest. And in these areas, and even out in the West, I was talking to a bunch of cattle ranchers out in Kansas. The issue of the tariffs is something they're really happy about. And even, I was talking to Anthony, who's a chemist working in the energy industry. And he said, look, I know my 401k is going to take a hit. However, I know in the long run, this is better for the country. If we start to bring back manufacturing, if we give people a level playing field, this is what I voted for. And this is a guy that's outside of the working, like sort of the blue collar image that you might have of someone working in manufacturing. This is a college educated guy who's traveled all over the world in the energy industry. So I think a lot of the different perspectives are geographical. So where I cover, people are happy. This is what they wanted to see. They are also willing to see some instability with their 401ks. They believe in the long run, things will return to a normal.
Beverly, are you experiencing it in your environs the same way?
Yeah, so I'm based in South Carolina and I hear very much the same thing. I think part of this is because the president is someone who people trust. So I think this is one of the reasons why he was reelected. The indictments only helped him because people saw him as somebody who's trying to fight the elite that wanted to take him down. So I think for the time being, people are going to trust what he's doing. Now, I think the key is how long does it take? So the president does keep using this phrase short term pain. And I think people are willing to do that. But how long is short term? So I really think that that's where the crux of this is. I also think an interesting side to this as well is tariffs isn't something that people know a lot about. It's very intricate in some ways. And I think this tariff discussion really breaks down into three different areas. One is this purely about being reciprocal, making sure that it's fair and free trade, level the playing field, get rid of tariffs? That's what I keep hearing from people. If it's reciprocal, they're fine with it. But then you get into whether or not this is about raising revenue. Is this about protectionism? And President Trump has not been completely clear on that. I think that's why the markets have been volatile, because what is the end goal? And I don't think that's clear right now.
So there's some public opinion polling out that suggests the tariffs are not particularly popular. I don't love the wording of these questions, and I think a lot of people couldn't help but be influenced by the news coverage. Why is the news coverage hostile to the president's policies? I think it's fair to say that the establishment media is more hostile to the policy than the country at large. I think that's fair to say. Why? Number one, the establishment media doesn't like Donald Trump. So it's a Trump thing, they're against it. Number two, the establishment media talks to and hangs out with Wall Street types, the very wealthy people who have flourished in under a world with international trade, and less likely to hang out with people who live in Selena's neighborhood who have not flourished in the last 30 years. Three, they grew up as free traders. A lot of them went to Ivy League schools or other schools, and they just have learned trade barriers are bad, tariffs are bad, free trade is good. And then they like controversy, and this is controversial, so they like that. And they tend to be globalists and have a globalist attitude. So they're I won't say they're as concerned as what happens in Germany as they are in the United States, but they think more globally than about America first. All of that means that we're all trying to understand not just what's happening and the impact on the country, but how people are feeling about it from a point of view. If you're reliant at all on the establishment media, it's not a complete accurate portrayal. And here we have someone in Western Pennsylvania and someone in South Carolina who are here to tell you that where they are, there's much less upset, much more, I would say, maturity than the billionaires are showing about what's going on, and a confidence that at a minimum the president deserves a chance to do this. Selena, you wrote this great story. One of the smartest things the Washington Post has done in the last 20 years is to hire Selena to write for the Washington Post, a voice of a type that doesn't normally appear in the paper. If you don't have a Washington Post subscription, it's worth it just for this. How often are you writing for the Post? Like every week, every other week?
No, once a month.
Once a month. Okay.
Yeah, these are really deep dive
Yeah.
stories. Yeah.
So the piece you wrote that published yesterday, or maybe late the day before, is about you're visiting a steel mill. Tell people what you saw, what you learned as it applies to the discussion about tariffs and globalism.
So just for a minute, I have to fangirl as someone who grew up in Pittsburgh and steel was everything. It was such an honor to be able to cover this. I mean, they have not let journalists inside this building for decades.
Where's the mill? Tell folks where it
I
is.
was in West Mifflin, Pennsylvania, in the Urban Works, where the rolling steel mill is. It's 83 years old. It was so great to be able to be there, see what these men and women do, see the technology that they work with, but also how they work with their hands, and you just feel the heat from the furnace. It was really a humbling and joyful experience.
Beverly, the answer is probably no, but have you ever been in a steel mill?
I have not.
Okay, I have too. Selena, I compare it to the one time I went on an aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
Like it's just an amazing visual experience to see people doing their jobs in a setting that is extraordinary with the heat and the power of the equipment. It's incredible. So sorry to interrupt, but I just want to validate what you said because I went once and it was amazing. Go ahead.
Yeah, it is absolutely amazing. All I can say is it's like it smelled like work, right? You just had you had this sense that something big was happening there. And so the reason that I went was twofold. I wanted to see how these guys felt about the Nippon deal. If anybody doesn't remember, Nippon put a offer in to buy US Steel in December of 2023, and it sort of rocked the world. US Steel was once the largest company in the world. It was the first billion-dollar company in the world. And then in its name itself, United States Steel was everything that you thought of about with America and that work ethos and building things like bridges and roads, but also aircrafts and tanks for during the World War I and World War II, right? So there's just this sense of Americanism with it belongs to this country. So the idea that a Japanese company was going to buy an American company that symbolized so many things, really initially the local union workers, local 227 steel workers were against it. And then they became skeptical. And then they started to do their homework. And they soon found that it was in their best interest that Nippon would buy them. They need a new rolling mill there. That rolling mill that I saw there is 86 years old, right? And they need new technology. They need to be more efficient. They need to be able to compete. And they were not going to get that from US Steel. And US Steel was point blank in telling them that. And so, they started to be able to also get some more gimmies or more concessions from Nippon. A promise to build a new rolling mill, a promise to be there for at least 10 years, right? And a promise of investing anywhere from $2 to $7 billion. That it was made them change their mind about this deal. Now, who was against it? Joe Biden, the most adamantly, along with, I'm going to forget the US Steelworker International president's name. He's out of Cleveland. He was against it as well. And so was Trump, but Trump was against it with nuance. You know, there's always this sense, it goes back to that quote that I said, voters take him seriously, but not literally, but reporters take him literally, but not very seriously. These guys believed there was nuance when he said no, that something was going to happen, that there was going to be a deal, whereas Biden was just adamantly against it. And they thought of that as the end of their line. Now, in February, Trump met with the, is it Prime Minister of Japan? Is that what they're called? Okay, in the White House. And since then, Trump, Nippon, the Japanese, Howard have all been infuriated, and US Steel have all been in very intense negotiations for something to happen there. And I don't know what it would look like. I suspect it's going to look more like a partnership or a deal, something that keeps that US Steel name. But this is very, like, I cannot express to you guys enough how important this is in Pennsylvania. Think about what the name of our football team is. It's not the Pittsburgh UPMCs, right, which is the largest employer, which is a medical entity, a series of hospitals. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers. Even though, you know, most people have never even been in a steel mill, that association, that cultural association with that idea of steel being made here is deeply important, and it impacted people's votes in a way that, in a nuanced way, and especially in the suburbs, that people don't understand. I mean, that you may have not worked there, but your grandfather did, or your great-grandfather, or your neighbor, whatever. We are culturally associated with steel. Our number one beer in Pittsburgh is called Iron City, right? I mean, everything is about steel. So the saving of this company became a nuanced thing in the election cycle. And it has continued as Trump continues to project that a deal or a partnership will happen. It continues to solidify his support in this state as opposed to erode it. And that goes to tariffs. Tariffs are very important in the steel industry. You know, cheap steel, steel dumping, all of those things have impacted these lives, these communities. And if you drive around Western Pennsylvania, two towns like McKeesport, where Chris Lasavita is from, or Aliquippa, and you see miles and miles of empty steel mills, you are constantly reminded of what was taken away from you, how many people left, how many family members left. And so that's why it's much more nuanced than people understand, but that's why tariffs, as my long way of saying that's why tariffs are okay here.
Either subscribe to the post to read the piece or get around the paywall.
I tweeted the last tweet I did on it. Zito
free link
is a free one.
Free link. Okay, read the piece. The characters are great, the setting is great, the storytelling is great, but it makes some really important points about where the country is, not just Western Pennsylvania. I recommend you go find it. Beverly, lots of discussion here and elsewhere about the quality of communication from the president and administration, something you know quite a bit about. Here's the president, number 4, please, talking today in the White House about the tariffs.
For those of you that want to know the tariffs, you've been hearing about tariffs, we're taking in almost $2 billion a day in tariffs, $2 billion a day. And we're doing very well. And we're doing very well in making, I call them tailored deals, not off the rack. These are tailored, highly tailored deals. Right now, Japan is flying here to make a deal. South Korea is flying here to make a deal, and others are flying here. I mean, my only problem is I'm not sure I have enough. We're going to have to use those great law firms, I think, to help us with that. But we're going to probably do that, actually. We're going to use them, and we're getting them for the right price because we need a lot of talent. We have a lot of countries coming in that want to make deals.
Yeah, really, how do you think the president's doing and his team is doing communicating why people should support the tariffs even in the wake of market decline and other dislocations?
Well, I think there is still a lot of confusion, as I was saying earlier, about what the goal is in some respects of this. I do think the American people who voted for Donald Trump definitely support him. Even Speaker Johnson came out this week and said, let's let him do what he's going to do. He was voted, give him time to do so. And I do think that that's what the Trump voter is thinking right now. Now, I do think it's very interesting that, as you were saying earlier, Mark, the administration isn't all on the same page. So you see this fighting take place in the public square. I actually think Trump doesn't mind that. He likes people to battle it out and then take the best idea. But in general, when it comes to these negotiations, I do think it's great for people to come to the table. By the way, nobody could question whether or not he works a lot of hours. He's a hard worker. Clearly, he's doing that, and that this is now his economy. But will he make these deals? That is the question. That's what people are hoping for who are supportive of him. But there are a lot of people in the Republican Party who are keeping quiet right now, a little bit scared. This obviously is very different than the free trade perspective that Republicans have. It's been interesting to see the Wall Street Journal comment on Trump's style and his policies. National Review Online has been saying a lot of things. And I think we're going to start seeing more and more Republican elected officials speaking out as time goes on. If the deals don't come to a head and they can sign and make them fair trade deals, again, this is short-term versus long-term. Where are we going to be? But I do think him making deals is going to be an important aspect of that. And I just don't think we know what those deals look like yet.
Is it important that the deals bring manufacturing back to the United States, or is it enough to simply level the playing field on free trade?
I think for most people, it's going to be leveling the playing field. And here's the reason why, is even when you take a look at car manufacturing, it's a very global market. Very few cars, I think.
All right.
This country, even in Greenville, I live right down the road from BMW, the largest American plant that we have here. And you usually think of BMW, okay, German vehicles, but it employs a lot of American workers. So I think the way we look at manufacturing is much more nuanced and layered these days, and we work in a global way. And if you're looking at some of these tariffs taken into effect that Trump has talked about, we are talking about cars going up maybe up to $4,000 or $5,000, if not even more, on cars when they've already gone up so much during the era of COVID. And that's what I don't think people are going to be okay with. It's going to disrupt the market quite a bit. I think it's about making good trade deals with our allies, making sure we have good footing with people who we agree with, which then keeps manufacturing strong in the States. And we also have to keep in mind, I really don't think this is about more jobs, because innovation is leading to so much more technology to make it more efficient. I think this is, for many people, if there's the nostalgia of we're going to have people working in factories again, I don't think that that's what this is going to lead to. We're headed towards a more efficient model. I think it's whether or not some of the money stays here.
Okay, I want to play for you, Selena. Mr. Greer, he's the U.S. Trade Representative. Hasn't been as visible as some of the other spokespeople, but I want you to listen to him. This is Greer, number 8, before the Senate Finance Committee today, talking about the tariffs.
We've seen one of the worst drops in the stock market in over 35 years.
We've certainly seen volatility.
Have we seen one of the worst drops in the stock market in over 35 years?
I think, and
You
Senator
can't
Warner
say yes.
talked about
We'll move
this.
on. If you don't want,
Well, I know everyone's concerned about Wall Street, and I'm just concerned about Main Street and getting these jobs
okay, let's
back,
talk
sir.
about Main Street, Mr. Greer. Last time you were
Okay, Selena, what's your view of the right way to talk about the tariffs? What's the way that is resonating with people in terms of people who are inclined to support them?
Well, one of the things that Trump has done effectively, I think, in terms of the people that I cover, is that he talks past, and you know this, he talks past the media. He talks directly to the voter. And that normal filter that legacy media has been able to utilize is less authoritative than it once was. So when they're talking about tariffs, or people are listening about tariffs and trying to understand it, they're not hearing and seeing and watching this in the same way maybe any of us are. And so this doom is either looked at as performative, even if it's not. That's, you have to think about how is a voter at home thinking about this. You have to put yourself in their shoes, and they're very skeptical of someone like that. I couldn't see who it was that was asking the question. Who was that?
I think there was a senator from
Somewhere.
New Mexico.
New Mexico.
Okay. So they're just skeptical of everyone. And skepticism is healthy until it's not, right? Until it then creeps over into conspiracy. So right now people are being very skeptical about how people are reacting. So they see, to them, if I'm talking to these voters, they're like, look, it's the Democrats and the elites that are furious about this. It's not anybody I know.
Right.
And then that's sort of, you add a different layer onto that, and people say, I watched my entire neighborhood just eviscerated by tariffs. And I would also argue, manufacturers not investing into their companies. That's a different story. But in their mind, that's how they see it. And he said, I didn't see one reporter come around and see how we're doing, or making a fuss.
I'm going to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Finish up. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
So that's why, at this moment, there's not the sort of hair on fire that you might expect when the stock market goes down.
Right.
And they've also seen it come back. They've seen it come back from 2008. They've seen it come back from 2020. And they know there's pain, and then there's not pain. So there's a little bit of belief that the country will come back.
Right. I'm going to go to your questions after I ask both ladies one more question. So if you want to be in on the conversation, ask a question, make a comment, please raise your hand. Beverly, you first. What's the way that tariffs have most directly adversely affected you so far?
I looked at my 401k today, which I shouldn't have done, but I do agree. I think it's good to bounce back. Hopefully these trade deals will happen. There'll be some good negotiation. I would say the hardest part about the whole tariff situation is the explanation of it. It's such a hard topic to talk about because it is so complex and nuanced. And even when I talk to, let's say, family and friends who are educated people, middle class, when I say, okay, where are the trade or the tariff discrepancies among countries? People can't give me numbers. So there is definitely just trusting that things are unfair. Maybe they never thought about it before. And so I think it's a very hard topic to talk about when there isn't usually a day-to-day knowledge of what's going on.
Selena, how have you been most adversely affected personally?
I'm so tired from reporting.
Yeah.
I just, and what, for me, it is always, because I live in a very different world than most reporters do. I'm not saying it's an advantage or a disadvantage. It's just about place. And so trying to explain to my friends that live in DC or New York, that people aren't as freaked out as like you are, and they can't understand the people I report on.
Yeah.
But I can understand about the 401k. I mean, I'm 66 years old. I kind of need it, right? So, but I haven't even looked at mine. I haven't, not
Yeah.
because I'm trying to be a scaredy cat. I just haven't had a minute to do it.
Yeah. Beverly.
And real quick, just on that, in working on Capitol Hill, one of the things that's been really difficult as well is the way that President Trump does move forward with these different ideas is there usually isn't a concrete plan for economists to even be able to model what this would look like. So I think from a policy perspective, it's been very difficult for economists to talk about it because it's based on negotiation. What is somebody else going to do? We don't know. What's the effect going to be? So there's a lot of predicting going on, not a lot of certainty. And I think that makes it very hard for people to say, is this good or is this bad?
Great point. We're going to bring in the community. As always, presumption of grace to all and for all. Please tell us where you are and what's on your mind. We start off with White House Press Secretary George Brutus. George, welcome in. Thank you. Thank you for
Mark,
joining.
Thank you very much. I tell you, I hope you take this as a compliment. When I was a kid, Saturday morning cartoons were the best thing in the world, and Sundays were terrible. But Tim Russert always caught my eye, and he was always fair and funny, and he always had a glimmer in his eye. And you remind me of him. Like you are that fair, and I hope you take. He was just one of my heroes, and he made me understand politics.
I'm not worthy of the compliment, but I have huge respect for Tim and how great he was. So I appreciate you saying it. Thank you.
And all of a sudden, like everyone else, we love the platform. But I just want to tell you, like my dad was a union guy. He used to work for Western Electric. He used to make components for Bell Telephone.
George, let me just stop you. Tell us where you are and where you grew up.
Oh yeah, I am in Raleigh, North Carolina for the last 30 years, but I grew up in New Jersey, right by Giant Stadium, 16W on a turnpike.
Got it. Go ahead. Keep going. You're talking about your dad.
My dad, he grew up in Jersey City, New Jersey. His parents were immigrants here after World War I. They were Lithuanian. My mom's parents were Hungarian. So my dad, he never got his high school degree, but he got his GED, and he was a union guy who worked for Bell Telephone or for Western Electric. He never made more than 30 grand a year, and he put 4 of us through college. And every summer we had a week at the beach, and we had steaks on Saturday afternoon. That was my brothers and I's job to grill the steaks and not grill them too much. My dad. I don't think the middle class. When I look what's happened to all these places throughout the country that have been decimated by what we've done over the last 40 years, and we've lost all these jobs, give these wastelands. It makes me sad. Listen, I'm doing much better than my dad ever did. He'd be amazed at the life that I live. But even I feel stressed. So I just turned 60. I'll be 60. Well, I'll be 61 in May, and I'm looking at my retirement. And so I've lost some bucks over the last couple of days, but I will tell you this: if I had one message for the president, it's like, you got to keep strong, keep going. And if that means if I sacrifice some of my retirement for my kids or my grandkids, that's really cool with me. And that means I might have to work 3 or 4 or 5 years longer than I had originally intended to. Yep. But I would just ask, like what? This wakes me up sometimes.
Yeah.
If there were a Harris-Walz presidency right now, what would be going on? Like, is there any good coming out of that? Like, this guy is challenging all the norms. And listen, I had the opportunity many years ago. We had a meeting at Mar-a-Lago, and we were in like the Great Bar area, and I saw Donald Trump giant picture of him in a tennis outfit, and I was like, well, that's pretty weird, right? And so I really didn't care for him when he spoke to our company. He just speaks in these really grandiose terms, like your company, you guys, you're doing this better than ever. No one would believe it. And I didn't vote from the first time, but I voted from the next 2 times. And it's the first guy that talks to America. And first of all, I grew up in New Jersey, so I speak like he speaks, right? So I understand what he says when he gets a little harsh and a little aggressive, but I love it. And whatever the tariffs are on China and whatever happens, I'm willing to stick it out for the long term. And so I don't really have a question. I just
thank you for that. Really interesting. You speak for tens of millions. Selena, question for George, if you have one.
I just thought what you said was really hit on what I've heard from a lot of people that I've interviewed, where you said, you know what, if I lose a few bucks here or there, if it's better for the next generation or the generation after that, if it's better for the country, then I'm all in. That is really, really common. And so I just, from people that I interview, and I find that nostalgic, very it's like a warm fuzzy feeling when you hear someone say
Yeah,
that,
it's very touching.
because you're not going to find that on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
And so you're just very reflective of the people that I interview.
Yeah.
That was
May I say one more thing? And
Yes,
it'll be-
sir.
So my basketball coach, he's 15 years. This is my high school coach. He's 15 years older than me, so he's 75 now. And I was talking to him this morning, and he does, like, teachers don't get a great pension, right? They do what they can do. Now he's teaching at Seton Hall University, and he worried about it. And I just, he's like-minded, but I just, like, the worst thing, because my brother did this in 2008. My brother took everything out of the market and put in a 3% guaranteed fund. He has never clawed his way back. So I talked to my coach today. I was like, listen, if you can weather the storm, if you don't have to take withdrawal, like, just weather the storm, because people get hurt when your emotions take over. And then if you take everything out and you're guaranteed 3%, if you lose 30%, 3%, you never get back. And that means you have to have faith in America and faith in what the president's doing. And we're going to come back. It's just, every day, if you look at the stock market, it'll make you crazy. So don't look at it, and look at it in 10 years.
Yeah. Beverly, question or comment for George?
Yeah, just a question for you, George. And this is something I've been hearing from people, and it resonates with what you're saying, which is sure, I'm willing to lose a few bucks. And their reason is because they think this country is over if we don't do something drastic. So do you feel like you're in that camp, that this is the chance for America to stay as it is, or to try to rebuild? And if Trump doesn't do this, it's lost. I almost feel like it's World War II people coming together to do what they needed to do for the country. And I feel that sense from people when I talk to them.
Yes.
Well, thank you for that, Beverly. I will tell you, if we don't do it now, no one's going to have the nerve to do it. Listen, there's a lot of things about President Trump I do not care for, right? I wish he would use his words differently. But if it doesn't happen now, name a person that would stand up to the other countries, even our friends. And he says they're taking advantage of us, and that's being polite. They are. So we see everybody jumping to the table right now. So we'll go to zero. We'll go to zero with you. But they don't address the VAT tax and all the other impediments to us getting in other markets. So I just look at it. This is the guy for the moment, and history is wildly funny or fantastic. They put the people in the right place at the right time. And I really, like I said, there's a lot of things I don't care about him, but he's got the nerve to just stand still and listen, if it helps my grandkids, I love it, because I'm 60, I'm 6'7". I go on the big dog theory. Big dogs don't live as long as little dogs, right? And that's just how it is. So I might have 20 good years left, 15 good years left. I don't care about those 15 years. I want to see what happens in 40 or 50 years when my kids are having their kids.
Selena?
I just want to say something, and to George's point about, doing it, we have to do it now. If any of your listeners don't know this, or viewers don't know this, I was just 4 feet away from the president when he was shot in Butler, and I had I've interviewed him several times. He called me the next morning. We had several, in fact, a lot of this is in my upcoming book. But one of the things that he said was, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I was given, for whatever reason, this moment. I was spared for whatever moment. And he really believed that there was a divine intervention, something God, right? And he said, because of that, if I'm president, I believe I am supposed to work with great expediency, be very, very fast, because there's not much time, and I don't have much time to do this. And there is a reason I was spared, and I'm supposed to do this for the American people.
Selena, I was watching that afternoon. I had a split screen. I don't remember what I was watching, a game on one screen and the Trump rally on another screen. And at first I didn't know what happened. And when you saw it, it took a couple of hours, a couple of days maybe to sink in. What a travesty that. Well, I mean, we just seen a president assassinated on live TV, and by the grace of God, he's still here. So I believe that changed him as a person. I don't know the guy, but I believe that he's doing a lot of things with a lot of conviction. And like I said, right place, right time. and
George.
right person.
George, thank you. I want to get some other folks in, but
Thank
very
you, Mark.
grateful to you for all you said. Tell us, how did you become part of Two Way?
Oh, so it was September of last year. A buddy of mine, I was in a meeting in Nashville, and a buddy of mine said, "Hey, you know, Mark," and I didn't know if you were off there, but he said, "Mark Halperin's back on the air." And I said, "Well, where?" And then he said he started your new format. And then since then, I've been watching every day. And you were a great help throughout the election, which either way things were going or not going, I think you brought people together. And that's what was really cool about with you, Dan and Sean, is that, listen, you all smile at each other every morning. You don't agree on everything. And that's what brings everybody together. So thank you for doing that.
All right, man. Thank you. Really enjoyed your participation. Grateful to you for sharing all that. Selena, tell everybody about your book. You mentioned a little bit, but when is it available? And tell people why they should be interested in buying it.
So the book is called Butler. As I said before, I was only 4 feet from the president when he was shot. It was, and Mark, you understand this. It was happenstance that I was there. I was only supposed to interview him for 5 minutes before the rally that day. And as often happens to journalists, that was changed several times. You're going to do it after. No, we're not going to do it today. Then finally got a phone call and they said, "Hey, do you want to fly to Bedminster with the president and have a longer interview?" I'm like, yes. And so just before he was about to go on, he had asked me, someone came running up and saying, "It's go time." I thought, okay, they changed their mind. I'm going to do it now. They took me behind the stage. And I said, "Where are we doing this interview?" And they didn't know. So they went back and asked him. And then they came back very sheepishly and said, "He just wants to say hi to you." So I said hello. But at that point afterwards, it was time to go out. That's how I ended up in the buffer. And that's how I ended to be just a few feet away from him. The story takes a look at why he, first of all, chooses places like Butler or Luzerne County or Ashtabula, Ohio, right? Places that presidents don't go to. The only two presidents to have ever gone to Butler County, Pennsylvania, have been John Kennedy and Donald Trump. And Donald Trump isn't the only president that was shot in Butler. George Washington was shot not that far away from where, and in the same area as well. A couple hundred years before. So the story is a look at that day. It's a look at why Butler, but it's also, and Mark, you and I communicated a lot during the through text during the election. I saw a very, very different election cycle than people saw in on air. And so I take the reader through that in a very intimate way, and you really get to see what was really happening in Pennsylvania, and why what you thought might be happening, in particular with Walz and Harris, wasn't really happening. And I also had some really great interviews with the president. There's some very powerful, some very emotional interviews. He also chased me with hairspray, so that's a thing.
When can people buy the book?
You can buy it July 8th. Now. You can pre-order now. I promise you it is a very, very good book. Very emotional, but very good book.
And out in July, as you said.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. Everybody should go buy it. Peter, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are after you unmute and what's on your mind for Beverly and Selena.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Again, I've been a longtime listener since before the election. Kudos to Mark and for Two Way, an incredible platform.
Thank you.
And Ms. Zito, Ms. Halberg, did I say it right? Great.
Yeah.
Very. It's your insight. You're both very insightful on what's going on. I'm a three-time Trump voter. Was a traditional Republican. Now I'm a national NatCon or MAGA person for a variety of reasons. Retired, I've said this before, retired military officer. And I'm also an attorney right now, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it from the perspective of military officer, and particularly I was military intelligence officer. yesterday or maybe the day before, Scroll, which is the tablet daily email, brought up the fact that they said that their perspective on the tariffs is it's really about national security, and that at the end of the day, even though it's tariffs against all of our trading partners, it's really focused on one country and one country in particular, and that country, of course, is China. And that in reality, what the president's trying to do and his team is trying to do is force people, particularly in Asia, but all around the world, because China now is exporting all around the world, is to bring those countries down to zero as far as trade barriers, and basically prevent them from being used as transshipment points for exports from China.
Yeah.
And all that makes a lot of sense to me. And so in other words, if it works, we're going to have, no tariffs for anyone except China. I'm not sure that's going to work, because the other huge mega block is obviously the EU, and they may be a whole different. Maybe the president and his team has to deal with them in a particularly different way. But I guess the other thing I'm concerned about, not to be pessimistic, I think Mark, you and Sean and had on to this morning. I think you brought it up, Mark, right? One of the experts said, "Look, we're a democratic country, and we're facing an authoritarian country, and our ability to withstand what they withstand is not level." So that's an ominous sign if we're really going to take China on. And I'll stop now.
Okay, Peter, thank you. Really interesting. Beverly, thoughts on what Peter said in China?
Well, I do think national security is an aspect to this, but I would actually make the argument that one of the reasons why coming to a deal with our allies is so important is that if they choose not to make a deal with us and the president chooses to puts tariffs on them, they may go to China for their goods. So there's an element where we have to be very careful that we're not actually emboldening China by sending our allies to them to do business with them. So I do think national security is important, but we have to realize that this could backfire in some ways as well, and we need to keep our allies very close. The other part of this as well, and I think this is what does hit on national security as well, is we need to make sure that if we do go to war with China, we are able to produce the goods that we need in order to go to war with them well, or Russia or Iran, or fill in the blank. Not that I'm really worried about our trade with Iran, but we do need to make sure that we have semiconductors, everything we need, et cetera, to be able to fight wars well. But I do think that there is this concern that if we piss off our allies and they go to China, that actually puts us in worse condition when it comes to national security.
Great. Beverly, thank you. Selena.
Actually, that's exactly what I was going to say. I completely agree with you, Beverly, in terms of the national security. Also, in terms of we don't want to push all of our allies over to China. We don't want them to, stay away from us and just go to them and make them more prosperous. And I think an element of this, and I'm not quite sure the connectivity of it yet. I haven't figured that out, but I think we are in the way that there was the arms war when I was younger. I think the war right now is the war for dominance in AI. And so America, and I know Trump, it has just more sort of made it a mandate across all the cabinet levels that is the priority to build AI data centers, to have the energy to supply it, whether it's natural gas, coal, nuclear, whatever it is. And that has a lot to do with our tension with China.
Peter, thank you. Really appreciate you coming on. Great question. And obviously, in some ways, the biggest topic is the contest with China. Barton, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know after you unmute where you are and what's on your mind for Beverly and Selena.
You hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm from New York City, and I voted for Trump 2 out of 3 times. And I'm so furious at this trade policy that I hope I can speak rationally.
Okay, take your time.
First of all, I agree with Musk. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Let me start with this. Let's say you even want to start tariffs and you knew the market was going to drop. Why would you do it right before people have to pay their taxes? You would have had, if you have done it in May, people would have sold their taxes. They would have had large capital gains, which you could tax next year and bring the government income. Instead, they do it right before people have to pay taxes. A lot of people are selling at a loss, so now they're going to have losses carried forward. Just the stupidity of the timing. Like, if I could think of it, Besson should have thought of it. Number two, there's China. We are approximately 15% of China's exports. They can withstand that. They have a large population of 1.4 billion people. They own a large part of US treasuries. If they decided to really play ball get into a war with us, they would dump US treasuries. Our interest rates would go through the roof. Not just that, in terms of trade surpluses, when a country has a trade surplus with the United States, what they do with that money is they buy US treasuries, thereby decreasing our interest rates. If no country had a trade surplus with the United States, our interest rates would go through the roof. What Trump is doing is he's walking across Niagara Falls and risking a recession. You spoke to those folks in Pennsylvania. They don't understand, I don't mean to sound elitist, the wealth effect of the stock market. The $5 trillion has been lost in the last 2 weeks. Trump talks about taking in $2 billion a day, which I don't even believe. Figure out how many days it would take to make up $5 trillion. The absurdity of this, does he want to bring jobs back to the United States? Then he can't have the tariffs. And then they're talking about no income tax, the incoherent messaging, the lack of focus, the sort of instability that he's causing in the markets. It's outrageous. And I agree with Trump on the DEI stuff and a lot of the stuff he's done. Now, let me just pontificate for one more second. I actually think this is to you, Selena, the fact that he was saved from being killed, the fact that he won an election against all odds, given what happened on January 6th, this has emboldened this guy. And he really thinks he's on a crusade. And he really believes this stuff. He's been spouting it since the 1980s about trade deficits, and he's wrong. The United States economy has gone great over the last few years. The average person in the United States has more material goods and general welfare than they had since the 1980s. I just think he's barking up the wrong tree. He has to set a clear course and a clear message, or else this country we could really be in for a horrific hard landing.
Okay. Barton, thank you. I'll say, as I often said earlier tonight for someone else presenting a different point of view, you also speak for tens of millions, without a doubt, and not just millionaires and billionaires, and not just people in New York City. So, Barton, thank you for that. Selena and then Beverly, respond, please.
Well, I'm not as informed enough. I mean, what you said makes total sense, but I don't understand it enough to have an expert opinion.
Why don't you understand?
Pardon? I don't understand any of it, and I'm not being a smart aleck. It's just not my level of expertise. I'm just reporting as to what happens where I'm reporting from and the worldview from that. And I completely understand that there's a completely different worldview. I'm just not expert enough to have anything to say about this part.
Okay, Beverly.
Yeah, one of the things I think is fascinating about Donald Trump is in his first term, he did some things that wasn't his passion, but he hired other people. They wanted to move forward with some more conservative policies, and he did. He loves tariffs. That is something that has been consistent with him throughout. I happen to disagree with him on a lot of what he's doing. Again, if this is about making the tariffs as far as the percent fair, that's great. But as you just mentioned, the idea of deficits being factored into what's unfair is actually not a good way to calculate it. It doesn't mean you could look at third world countries where they may trade to us more than we trade to them. It's not necessarily a signifier of anything but what type of goods they have and what type of goods we have. So this idea of trade deficits, I think, is a problem. And there's also this element of people are supportive if it leads to a deal that is good for America. Some people may not come to the table, and then what?
Yeah.
So there's a lot that still is up in the air. And I'll just say real quick final thing, and this is more from a constitutional perspective. I do personally have a lot of concerns about the power of the executive right now. Congress did push their power to levy tariffs and taxes, or tariffs in this case, to the president. What happens when a liberal gets in next time? I wish Congress would take the power back to deal with tariffs.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's going to happen, but there's
No.
certainly some people who would like it to. Barton, I'll just say three things that I think are countervailing to what you said. I'm not taking a position against what you said, but I think three things that people who in good faith oppose support what the president's doing. Number one is national security and the supply chain. There are just too many things we need to make in this country that we're not making in this country. Number two is other countries, particularly the non-tariff barriers, they're just not fair. We have some too, but there's just a lot of inequity, and it's not good for the United States, and we look like fools in the eyes of the president and many other people. And then I think maybe most important is there's a growing income inequality in this country. You talk about the 1980s, the level of income inequality is greater, and no one seems to be doing anything about it. So the president's idea is that this will help with income inequality. He may be wrong, it may totally fail, but those are three things that I think are perfectly reasonable goals for the United States that he is trying to deal with. Go ahead.
In terms of the supply chains, it's another ridiculous thing. It takes 4 or 5 years to build a fab.
We got to start. We got to start now if we're going to do it. The fact that it's going to take 4 or 5 years doesn't mean we shouldn't start.
No, but we should have started. In other words, if China plays hardball, which they might, because the Chinese are very honorable, very important to these people.
They might, but they're relying on us too for some things too.
Only 15%.
Well, but they rely on us for other things.
Well, all right, we'll see. I mean, I think we should have taken a more measured approach in terms of building things up before we played this game.
Yeah, he didn't. He doesn't think you can build it up without playing the game. That's his view. I got to cut you off only because we're getting close to time. But I'm very grateful to you, and you expressed it in a calm way, which I appreciate. So thank you, and appreciate you giving us that point of view. Thank you both, Selena and Beverly. Love having you both on. Hope you'll come back regularly, and anytime you wish, just call us up. Say you're crashing the show. Beverly, anything else you want to say in conclusion?
It's going to be interesting. And by the way, we have this same situation where we have the GOP trying to pass a budget. So talking about timing, we just had the guest talk about timing. It's whether or not Trump's tax cuts will be permanent. So that's happening at the same time. So it's a big week.
Yeah, he did a tweet, Truth Social right a couple minutes ago. It's kind of create a sense of momentum and optimism, even though they still don't have the votes. And they canceled, as I understand it, the vote in the Rules Committee, which is something they got to do before they bring it to the floor. Selena, anything you want to close with?
No, I guess whenever that person says, may we live in interesting times, I feel like it's been going on since 2012.
Yeah.
Really hasn't slowed down.
Yeah. Thank you both. Love having you on. Please come back. Tomorrow, 3 episodes, 9 a.m. Eastern time. Sean Dan and I here for the morning meeting. We'll have the overnights. I like to talk about the opens of the Asian market, so we'll talk about that. And then at 5 o'clock Eastern time, Meghan McCain's happy hour tomorrow, number 16, please. And Meghan will be here again. I urge y'all, if you've not watched Meghan's show, tomorrow should be your day. Wednesday, 5 p.m. Eastern time, Ben Ferguson and James Kirchick are her guests, and they'll be talking about everything that's going on in the world. And then right after Megan's show, I'll be back 2-way tonight. My guest tomorrow night, a congressman who I've never spoken to, and I'm really looking forward to it. Greg Landsman of Ohio, super interesting guy. If you've not listened to him, Democrat from Ohio, he's a great thinker and a great talker and very popular with his colleagues, and super glad he agreed to be on. So I'll see you in 23 hours with the congressman. Hope everybody has a good evening. Thank you for watching. Appreciate everybody who raised their hand and participated, and our two guests. And I'll see you at 9 a.m. Eastern with Dan and Sean. Thank you. Good night.